there's a celebration of Tim McCarver's life going on tonight. Actually, there's an event, and then tomorrow is the, I guess, ceremony you would call it. And believe it or not, they've asked AJ to speak. I don't really understand the thinking there, but we're going to find out, I guess, tomorrow.
Yes, I have context on this, Kratz. So,
yeah, go ahead.
Do you know about this, Kratz? The order?
No, I was just going to say he's well versed in the vernacular, so he would be illustrious at his engagement of speaking.
I'm at the compound, Ken. So just so you know, for a little background, I'm sure AJ will tell you this himself, 50 times. But the order is, I believe, Joe Buck, Bob Costas, and then AJ Pierzynski.
That's not the number 3 hitter I want in that lineup.
Oh, man, the pressure is on. All right, so anyway, I do want to start there, though. Did the virus make an impact at the GM meetings? Were there less face-to-face, things not getting done? Is everyone okay?
I guess everyone is okay. No one on our staff got the virus, as far as I know. Actually, I don't know of any writer that got it. It was simply some club people that were staying at the hotel. Most of the writers were not staying at that particular hotel. It was bad enough that they canceled the last meeting on the last day. So certainly something was going on. I can't speak to actual details. I don't know who got sick. I'm tracking other things at this time of year. So it wasn't fun because actually the last day, even the last night, Wednesday night, I kind of got out of there. I'm like, I'm not staying here. Usually I'd stay late and try to see as many people as possible, but I just kind of left, and then the next day I didn't come back because they did cancel that final meeting. So it was an odd GM meetings, to say the least.
Yeah, and the GI meetings, as Stephanie Apstein called it, was pretty clever. We do have one tweet to show to cap this off from our friend John Heyman, who wanted to make sure everyone knew, Ken, that he went to In-N-Out most nights. Okay, so he's good. It's funny when you start to get reporters saying what they ate and that they are okay versus what the news is.
Right. Well, we all had some fun with it, but
yeah,
I'm sure for the people who were ill, it was not that fun.
No. Agreed.
So the whole time.
Yeah, we're hoping everybody feels better on that front, in all seriousness. Okay, so Ken, let's start with what you wrote about the Brewers the other day, digging into your notes in The Athletic. The column is up there, and I think there's been a lot of buzz around what you wrote, and I would say speculating from fans. Like, what are we going to do here? I mean, is this going to look like a rebuild? Because the team doesn't usually go down this route, but will they take advantage? What else can you add? And what else have you seen since you put that out there about the fact that the Brewers can go in a variety of directions? And here's the crazy part to me when I was reading what you were putting out there, Ken. They won the division last year, and it's not like they're losing everyone. Woodruff was only on the team for half the year because of injury.
Right. Scott, it's a situation to be sure. And the Brewers are, let's face it, a low-revenue team. They've been that. And what is happening here is a question of timing. So Burns, Woodruff, and Adames are free agents after this coming season. Devin Williams a free agent after the following season. And they have a nice young group of position players, a core that is forming. And the thinking would be, if they made some trades, that they could perhaps acquire some pitching, some younger pitching, to complement those young position players. Now, their owner, Mark Attanasio, has always been opposed to a straight rebuild. They haven't done that, and they haven't needed to do that. But here they are. They just lost counsel. And I don't know that one thing has anything to do with the other, but given that you've lost your manager, you have a certain situation here with a number of players, it's something that they have to look at. All teams listen on all players at all times. We know that. But what I was told, and the reason I wrote what I did, is that there's a little bit more going on here, that they're listening and they're interested in kind of exploring some things. And I know some Brewers fans got upset with this, same Brewers fans who were telling me I was full of it when I was writing about Counsell possibly leaving. But the reality is teams have to look at their various windows, as we discuss, and decide what is best for them at that particular moment. And what might be best for the Brewers at this particular moment would be to trade Burns for sure, 1 year left, trade Adames, and then see what's out there for some of the others. If you're going to trade those two, maybe you trade Devin Williams with 2 years of control. Remember, the last time they had a big-time closer, they traded him at the deadline with 1+ year of control. That was essentially, or would be essentially, where Devin Williams would be at this year's deadline. So those are just some names. They can look at others too. But if you're the Brewers, you have to be considering all possibilities here. And you have to be considering the direction that I wrote about.
Now, in your article, you said teams don't actively go to teams and say, hey, do you want my guy? Teams come and say, hey, we're inquiring about your guy. Are you insinuating that possibly there's a little bit more of the other? Or what you said there's a little bit more than just the teams coming to the Brewers and saying, hey, what will it take to get Burns and Adames?
I think what I wrote, Eric, was more about their public positioning. And what they'll say is, we're not shopping our players. We're merely listening. When in reality, they might shop players. It does happen. So I don't know exactly at what level the Brewers are with this, but they certainly are listening. And it often is semantics, and it kind of cracks me up. I once wrote a whole article about the lies you hear at the winter meetings. And one is, we're not shopping our players, we're just listening. It goes on all the time. And the point of what I wrote in that particular part of the article was that this seems to be a little bit more than simply listening. This seems to be a real consideration of a strategy of going somewhat backwards to go forwards later.
All right, from one team that has some talent that could be traded, you wrote about Bobby Witt Jr. And I'm going to present you something because, maybe there's negotiations. There's not. Let's say these negotiations don't work out well. Bobby Witt's looking like a minimum $200 million player. Not saying the Royals can't afford it, but with 2 years of service, because nobody's ever done it, could they trade a guy like Bobby Witt Jr., who there's no other good, unless Adames is on the market, could they trade a guy like that who's never going to sign? Because every year, if he continues to do what he does, he's going to be a $300 million player. Then he's going to be a 300, and the Royals don't touch that. Could they trade him in a year, in an offseason like this, where it's a weak free agent class?
I don't see it, Eric, but I know where you're going with it, because if you can't sign him to an extension, then what are you looking at? You're looking at perhaps keeping him for the entirety of his 6 years of control and then letting him walk, which teams can certainly do. Most teams haven't done that lately, but they used to do that a little bit more often. And you could take that perspective on it. But with Witt, it's really interesting. A year ago, when all the big free agent contracts for shortstops started going down, Turner and Bogarts and Correa, all of those. Dansby Swanson was another one. If you were the Royals, why, actually, not if you were the Royals at that time were thinking, man, we're never going to be able to keep this kid. There's no way. And he went on to have an amazing season, right? 30 homers, 49 steals, I think 96 RBIs. But circumstances have changed a little bit. They know that obviously it will cost hundreds of millions to keep Witt. But they've had some internal discussions, and it's not as if they're saying there's no way we can do this. They're looking at it. And they're looking at it in part because they're trying to get a new stadium built. And they want to sell that to the public. And if you trade Bobby Witt, to get to your point, Eric, you trade Bobby Witt when you're trying to get a stadium built, good luck. So there is some momentum, perhaps. Actually, that's a strong word. Momentum is not the right word. But there is some thought that maybe they make him the Royals version of Patrick Mahomes. Maybe they make him the guy who's going to be the centerpiece of their future as they go forward and hopefully get into this new ballpark at some point in the near future. I don't know that it all will work out. Obviously, it's going to cost a lot of money, but we have a template from the Julio Rodriguez deal, a template from the Austin Riley deal. These were different contracts that were signed at different stages of players' careers. Corbin Carroll was another one. Corbin Carroll was less than 100 days of service. Julio, I believe, was less than a year of service or a year plus. And Riley was 2+ years. So you can look at those contracts. That's the starting point, or those are the starting points. Obviously, Witt Jr. is a middle of the diamond player, so he might be even more valuable than those guys. But it's not out of the question that this could happen.
I want to tie in two stories to your Reds story about Joey Votto. There's no playing time, right? You wrote there's no playing time. They might even have an excess of position players. And they're going to kind of platoon or like mix in DH first base, which I'm assuming is going to be with, league minimum type of players, is how I read what you were writing. But then essentially across the state, you got to pass Pittsburgh over to Philly. They're putting their franchise keystone in Bryce Harper at first base. Who's doing the right thing?
Both, I would say. And I understand the Reds' position. They have 7 position players in their infield. Now, Nick Senzel might be a non-tender candidate, so that would be 6. But most of those players, actually 4 of them, were rookies last year. These are young guys, and they can find playing time at first base DH for Steer, Encarnacion Strand. They can do this any number of ways. And Joey Votto would have clogged up that picture. And if we had Joey sitting with us right now, he probably would admit that as well. So for the Reds, this makes a lot of sense. And actually, it might even make sense to trade a guy like Jonathan India if they can get the pitching back in return that they like. The Phillies, it's an entirely different situation. It's a question of what is best for Bryce Harper and his career and what is best for their team going forward. And I can see the logic of Harper at first. Number one, for his career. He is a guy who, as we know, plays really hard. Putting him at first base will reduce the wear and tear on his body somewhat. It's not nothing, obviously, playing first base, but you don't have to run to the outfield every inning, and you don't have to, of course, chase balls down the way outfielders do. From the Phillies' perspective, it kind of opens up the outfield a little bit. They have some younger, good defensive players, Rojas, Pache, Brandon Marsh, of course. They still have Castellanos on their roster, and there's been talk that possibly he would be traded, but it seems to me this makes it a little easier to keep him, and then you have Schwarber in the DH spot. So it kind of improves them defensively in some respects, and it gives them a little bit more flexibility. Now, obviously, it was bad news for Rhys Hoskins, who is a free agent and meant a lot to that team and that franchise. But I thought that was the way they would go as long as Bryce Harper was willing to do that, and it certainly seems like he thinks first base could be a good thing for him in the future.
What are you hearing about discussed with Aaron Nola in the sense of, is he seen as a stable rotation piece with possible upside years, or is he seen as like a flat out 1 or 2 that's going to come and save a rotation?
A little of both. He certainly is a stable rotation piece. I don't know about upside. Eric, he's 30. He kind of is who he is, and I don't know that he'll get much better. Certainly could get better as he gets a little older because of his sheer experience. But the thing that recommends Aaron Nola the most is his durability. Second in innings just to Garrett Cole since 2018. Now, the last 3 years, 2 of those years, he's had high ERAs. But he was really good in the playoffs this year. And he's certainly someone, because of his style, his repertoire, it would suggest that he's going to age well. So a lot of teams like Aaron Nola, especially in this day and age when you have so few starters who go deep into games to save bullpens. Here's one that actually does and actually takes pride in doing it. Hasn't been on the injured list with an arm injury since, I believe, 2016. Hasn't been on the injured list at all since 17. So this guy is reliable, he's durable, and he's going to do well. And I know some of the initial free agent projections for the starting pitchers for guys like him were in the $120, $125 million range. Even Snell was somewhat low, in my opinion. I would expect that the whole group is going to do better than those lower projections. I think they're going to be doing really well. Yamamoto above $200 million. Blake Snell and Nola, in my view, could be above $150. I'm not great at predicting this stuff, but it just seems to me the demand for these pitchers in this era is going to be so great that they're all going to do really well.
Okay, so we have a fan question. It fits in perfectly. We are very prepared for this one. Sean Ireland in the chat. Manager update for Padres, Brewers, and Astros. Well, we're going to take a trip down memory lane, Ken, back like a month ago when we were trying to figure out an over-under of how many manager changes there would be. So let's run that. Over-under over the next week. 1.5 manager announcements. I would say firings, but you know how some teams will carefully craft their wording. 1.5, though. I feel like that could be a tough number over the next week based on what I've read from your article a couple days ago. What do you think?
Well, first of all, Scott, I have to ask, is Terry Francona included in this? Because he is stepping down. All right, no. So you're asking 1.5 firing.
Yeah, like, if the Astros miss out on the playoffs, Dusty, which you wrote about,
yes.
Buck situation, Boone and Melvin.
I don't know in the next week, 1.5, but I would say over the next month, yes, 1.5. And you know what, guys? Over. Yes.
So, Ken, that number hit during that week and then has now, tripled since then?
I think I went on to say in that discussion that there are always things that happen that we don't expect. That's always true. And if I had to guess even then, if you had said really put a number on it, I would have put it at probably 3 or 4. And we've exceeded that. It's certainly been a lively period with the managerial merry-go-round, more lively than I expected. The council thing just blew everyone away. And even the Bob Melvin situation, very unusual. A guy would leave a team to go to a division rival with the team's blessing that was letting him go. So we've had a lot going on for sure. And yes, there are 3 jobs left. So I guess you want me to go through those teams. I'll do my best. With the Padres, it certainly seems it's going down to Ryan Flaherty, who's been on their staff, and Mike Schilt, who also has been on their staff, the former Cardinals manager. A.J. Preller at the GM meetings basically said he wants someone that he knows from working with in the past recent times. He wants someone he has worked with. He thinks that's best. He had Bob Melvin, hadn't worked with him before. He had Jace Tingler, had not worked with him before. Andy Green the same, and those didn't work out for him. So now his thinking is, all right, let's get a guy that I'm familiar with, that I'm comfortable with, and my guess would be that it will be Flaherty, but I don't know that for sure. With the Astros, Joe Espada is certainly a guy who has been waiting long enough. He's been the bench coach. He's had a lot of responsibility under Dusty Baker and A.J. Hinch before him. He's someone who, for whatever reason, has not gotten a job yet, even though he's interviewed a bunch of times. Dana Brown, the GM, spoke highly of him this week. The question is whether the owner, Jim Crane, will go along with that. Jim Crane is a guy who likes names. He likes sizzle. And Joe Espada is a big name in Houston, I guess, because he's been there with the team. But he's not, for instance, Don Mattingly or Buck Showalter or someone like that. So that's going to be really interesting to see, basically, if Jim Crane lets Dana Brown pick the manager. We'll see. Now, there was one more left, and that would be the Brewers. The Brewers general manager, Matt Arnold, came out at the GM meetings and said that bench coach Pat Murphy is someone that they're looking at quite heavily. He was the bench coach under Counsell. And for continuity's sake, Pat Murphy would be the right choice. He's popular with his players, and he's a guy that you can certainly see stepping in and doing it. He was the interim, or one of the interims, in San Diego under Preller. How it ultimately shakes down, I don't know. I would assume they're going to interview some outside candidates as well, but it certainly sounds like Murphy is a leading candidate for that position, and we'll see if, in the end, he becomes the Brewers manager, or if he goes to the Cubs as Counsell's bench coach, which I would imagine is another opportunity that is available to him. So we still have the 3 left, and it's been kind of a crazy time for sure.
I love it. Well, I hope that we get decisions next week. Ken, appreciate it. You look well rested, so enjoy the next time period. And doing better than most. So we hope everyone gets well soon, and hope you're gearing up for the next battle, which will be winter meetings.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, have a good weekend, Ken. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. Ken Rosenthal with us on FT.